the Underwater Photography Show. As always, I am Matthew Sullivan.
And I'm Alex Mustard.
And
And
before we get into this, if
I
I
was
sound
going
a little
to.
goofy,
Oh,
um, I have come back from DEMA, which is what we're going to be discussing, with some sort of cold or illness, as many people do. Um, so it's going to be a catch-up episode. I've just been away at DEMA for a week. Alex has been in the Red Sea for a week, so we're going to cover both of those.
I was actually about to interrupt you there to ask you how DEMA was. What was your big takeaway, apart from the cold, from
Yeah.
the show? What products caught your eye? What news? What was the vibe like in the underwater photography community? So, yeah, tell us all about it.
Yeah, so I thought DEMA this is my fourth one, and other than the one during COVID, I think this was probably the slowest overall, or at least the least busy. It seemed, and maybe that's just because it was the convention center, the hall was bigger this year, but it definitely seemed like there was less traffic overall. And I was in the Image Resource Center. Nauticam was there, Kraken was there, Backscatter was there, the stage was there. So you would have thought if anywhere was going to be crazy busy, it would have been us. It came in waves, but not like it has been in the past. And perhaps part of that is due to less new products this year. Like there were some things that were kind of making um, their debuts in a sense, but not a ton. So Nauticam had the MFO and the SMC3, which are new-ish, and I think it's probably the first time a lot of people, myself included, saw them in person. Um, the AOI had a new strobe out, which I had not heard about, and they're not on the website yet, so I don't know much about them.
What level is that pitched at? Is it kind
It
of because
looked,
AOI generally chase the mass market, don't they?
yeah, it was a big, physically big strobe, so I imagine they're going after more of a higher end market. The it looked to me like they may have still been prototypes, like they're a little rough around the edges, and maybe that's why they're not on the website yet. But round flash tube, long body, it looked like it had its own battery pack, or like it was using 21 700 or something like that. So definitely a step up from the current little strobe that they have. But how well it'll perform, I'm not sure yet, and I don't know if anybody's actually had them in the water yet. Backscatter said they had just received them like a couple days before, so even they weren't too sure of anything about them yet.
Mm.
Excuse me. Um, Kraken had a new light that I wasn't actually aware of. It's going to be a 25,000 lumen where you can actually change the color temperature underwater to match whatever the water and light look like, without needing extra filters. So it's going to should be ready by the end of the year, or maybe in the spring. But
Powerful too.
yes, and it's the same size as all the current 18,000 lumen lights from Kraken, so it's not overly big.
Mm.
But that was a hit, at least at the Kraken booth, was being able to change the
Mm.
the color temperatures, which I think is going to be really cool for videographers. Marilux was there. Didn't They don't think they had anything too new, mostly just showing off things that have come out in the last year or so.
I guess there's quite a few other companies who may have new Canon R5 Mark II housings.
Yes. So Nauticam had one there, and Isoda had one there. Oh, Isoda actually now has, this was new. They have an adapter specifically for Nauticam wet lenses onto Isoda housings. So it's a 20 millimeter extension ring with Nauticam like bayonet latch on it. So you can put WCPs, FCPs, or anything like that directly onto
Mm.
Isoda housings, which was cool. Their R52 housing is slick. It has a what do they call it? The keypad on the back instead of the individual buttons, which actually seem to work nicely. Really compact housing, obviously built well like the rest of them.
Mm.
Nauticam's R52 housing is nice as well. I mean, it goes goes without saying they're not putting out bad housings. I also
I
got to
guess
see.
it's nice though to see a manufacturer, you know, not putting their head in the sand about the popularity of the Nauticam lenses,
Oh, with
because
size, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
because it's for years everyone just rings up Saga Dive or whoever and says, "Mate," but I know that Jose from Saga has been talking about retiring for forever. I don't know if he ever will, but or if he has already. But it's yeah, it seems silly that the manufacturers are like, oh, we don't want to support something from another brand. And I think the Nauticam wet lens is making that adaptability makes more of a selling point for your housing rather than pretending Nauticam don't exist.
Yeah, because then if somebody wants to use those optics and that's the most important thing to them, then the only option is not a cam, and then you've lost, potential housing
Yeah.
sales. So I think it was a cool little product. It seemed to work well. Elisa showed me all how it worked, and I know later on she was at the Nauticam booth, and they were putting it onto housing, or they were putting it onto the WACP and the FCP, and it worked perfectly. So that'll be pretty cool, I think. Backscatter obviously had the hybrid flash there. That was their big thing for this year, but it's not a new product necessarily. It's just its first DEMA.
Yeah, it's come out this year though. I mean, I think it's we kind of I think it's fair enough that it should be like a big focus in the first year because it's. I mean, it came out in the summer or early fall. It's not new. I mean, it's still really new.
And then there were, Kelvin was there. There were a bunch of new, like, Asian or Asian underwater imaging companies there that I'd never heard of before. CNC was there. They had an R5. Well, they said an R52 housing is coming. The ones they had there, I believe, were Z8 and maybe not Z8, maybe A7R5, and then the Universal Sony housing.
Yeah, I know they've been doing with Sony housings. I haven't seen anything beyond Sony housings from CNC. So
So
it'd be
they
good
had a
to hear.
big banner at the booth that said R52 coming soon. So I assume they're at least
Okay.
making that. And I think Z8 is in my head because they said they're not making a Z8 housing. Maybe that's
Yeah.
why I'm getting confused with it. But um, CCAM was there. They might have had their R52 housing as well.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, it was mostly that, mostly new like housings for cameras that have come out this year. So I think Nauticam also had the R1 housing, um, and then A93 housing, obviously. But those were most of the big things. So nothing earth-shatteringly new that hadn't already been, talked about a little bit. I think the biggest surprise to me was Kraken's temperature changing light.
Yeah.
But everything else was kind of either expected or it's been out for a bit, and we kind of know what it is.
Was there any good social side? Is that where you caught your cold?
Yeah. So I don't. I for whatever reason I do not sleep well in at DEMA. So I was from day one. I was exhausted, and we'd end the show, go to dinner, and I would at least go right to bed or attempt to go to bed. It was good. I would say this year's DEMA was the best in terms of meeting people and getting to socialize at the show.
Mhm.
And perhaps part of that's because it was a bit slower, so there was a little more downtime.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah,
Is
it
there
was cool.
still a? I mean, I know that in the past that Dive Photo Guide used to run a photographer's social. They don't do that anymore. And I'm
I
a
know
bit out of date.
Dan.
I've been to Dima for a long time, so.
I know Dan threw up, like Dan Divers Alert Network threw a party the first night, I think. But I was not I was not about to drag myself to that. So I mean, there'd be groups of people who would end up getting together just because you haven't seen each other in a while. But
Mm.
so I went out to dinner the last night, I think, with Byron and Andy, which was nice. Um, but yeah, it was good to meet people and like people I've already known, people I am now know. But in terms of like overall socialization, there wasn't any big event or anything like that.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, it was a fun show. It's tiring as always if you're talking to people for 10 or 12 hours a day.
And if you've
Um,
got a cold as well, it takes it out of you
yeah,
too.
yeah. And
Yeah.
I wasn't the only one. Pretty much all of us ended up getting hit pretty hard with something. And I'm sure there's plenty of people who have since gone home with who knows what. But it was a good time. I'll look forward to next year.
So the
Um,
thing that was dominating my social media during Demo was Erin and Co. launching the Backscatter Exterminator software, which obviously we'd done an episode on as well, and loads of people were sharing that and commenting on that. So I was kind of seeing that. Sometimes it's a bit of your own echo chamber, but that seemed to be like the big thing that was on my airwaves. I mean, I was on a liveaboard, so I wasn't exactly online all the time, but that was
yeah.
I was seeing. Was that a big thing at the show, or was it kind of bigger on social media
I think it
because
was
it
bigger
wasn't a
on
physical
social
product?
media, but whenever she would do like her presentation at the Backscatter booth on it, it would have good attendance. So
Mm.
um, you always knew when Aaron was talking because all of a sudden just you just noticed there's more people around. And then she'd give her presentation on it, and the backscatter booth would get packed, and then
Mm.
people would slowly drift out after that. Um,
Yeah, that was always when I used to go to DEMA, which is a long time, is a long time ago, as I was saying. Um, that the talks used to be a massive kind of pump for that section of the show. You'd have really speakers that were kind of people really wanted to see, like Erin, and you'd get lots of people coming into the imaging area because of that, and then afterwards they'd stop at a few booths, and it was really important. Were there any other good talks, any other good presentations, or
um,
was it not such a big thing anymore?
so it was still pretty much constant. I didn't get to watch any of them. I saw Maxwell went and presented on the octopus again, so I
Mm,
watched a couple minutes of that. That one had all the seats were filled and people were standing, so that was
mm,
cool. I know Mike Bardick gave a couple talks at the actual imaging stage. Um, I think those are the only. Michael Awe presented. Alex Rose from Ocean Geographic presented. Those are the ones that I can actually remember, and there were talks going on the whole time.
yeah.
I just It's impossible to keep up with them all.
Sure, I think it's always a pity though when they don't maybe novel some of the people you don't get to hear from that often. I
Yeah.
think I mean, obviously you want to hear from people who are good speakers and provide good information, like Erin and Mike and those sorts of people. But at the same time, I think there are also at DEMA often some quite other photographers you don't tend to hear talking so much. And yeah, I think they should make more of an effort to kind of get them to show some pictures and talk, because I think it will be a chance to hear from some interesting folks.
But I don't know how that works though. Does DEMA approach people? Because if they are approaching people, then maybe it's just because they're going to go for the people who have spoken before.
Yeah,
But
I think it's more that it's actually maybe controlled more by the exhibitors. The
mm,
exhibitors propose the speakers.
oh, okay.
But I was like, I know that like CCAM had quite a good gathering of interesting photographers, and it was like be a pity that like some of those and didn't talk, because like probably like some of those guys probably never spoke in the states, and it'd been cool to hear them show
Yeah.
some great pictures and talk. Which I think is but yeah, I mean it's really good to hear the to get your insight on it as well, because you don't always get a lot of honest feedback from events like this. Everyone's like, "Oh, it was amazing, it was brilliant," and is kind of, I know you've got a cold as well, which is dampening your enthusiasm. But it's yeah, it's good to call it as it is as well. When it's like a bit of a quiet year for announcements, not that well attended. It's yeah, maybe
Yeah.
next year will be a boom again.
It wasn't just me because everyone in the imaging center inevitably at some point it would come up like, yeah, it's just me or does it seem slow this year? So everybody was kind of noticing. I don't know how all of the other vendors were that were not image related were doing, but the Image Resource Center in general, which is usually one of the busier places, just seemed a bit quiet. And then all of a sudden you'd have 40 people show up at once, and then you'd have an hour where you get one or two trickling in. So maybe it was just that it was coming in bunches instead of steady. Maybe that's contributing to it, but
Maybe it was
yeah,
the expense, because I know that they had the
yeah,
F1
that.
racing that at the time and on as well, and maybe it was like a bit more expensive to go to Vegas that week, and a few people were like, well, or maybe businesses were like, well, we'll take 3 staff this year instead of 5, and it
Yeah, yeah,
brings the numbers down, and
it's
then
entirely cool.
when a stand is manned by kind of minimum numbers, staff aren't free to then go around the rest of the show so much.
Yeah, that's true.
So
It was definitely more crowded in the city. Like every hotel was packed.
yeah.
Maybe there just weren't opportunities for a lot of people to come. That's entirely
Mm.
possible. But I'm looking forward to next year. Next year's in Orlando, so it's nice and close to home, and don't have to fly. And um, the it's the last time it was in Orlando, I think was the busiest DEMA I've been to.
Mm.
So maybe I'm sure it's just coincidence, but it'd be nice if it's back here next year and that
Yeah.
it's nice and busy.
Yeah, I've never been to it in New Orleans, but I've been to Orlando and Vegas, and enjoyed both of them a lot. But
Yeah,
obviously prefer Orlando as the city to Vegas, just because Vegas is so good.
I do as well.
Yeah,
I do as well. Vegas is not my favorite place. There's good food, but that's about where the extent of my affection for it
Mm.
ends.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
while you were enjoying yourself in there, I was away in the Red Sea. Um, the other news I had that week actually was that I was. It was announced that I was asked to become the new president of the British Society of Underwater Photographers, which sounds a lot grander than it is. I think it's kind of formalizing really the kind of the role I've done for for a long time, which within that society, which is not to be that involved in the actual nuts and bolts running of it, but to be a good overall kind of steering force, trying to keep both the past and the future on the right tracks in terms of the society. I mean, the society's got a rich history. It's important to remember that, and also to make sure that the society stays bang up to date, so that current underwater photographers want to be part of it. So yeah, but it was so I was very much enjoyed that. I'm not going to make any jokes on the president front, but yeah, well, because obviously, during my previous Red Sea trip, some other presidents got announced, so I'm not going to want to tie the two things together. And then, yeah, the Red Sea trip was my final workshop trip of the year. I've been to the Red Sea. Those who watch every episode of this will know that I've been in the Red Sea just a couple of weeks, or just 8 days before, I think. No, less, actually. I was only home for 4 days between the two trips. But the previous trip, I'd been to southern Egypt, Red Sea, and this time it was northern Egypt, mainly around Sinai Peninsula, Red Sea. So, and actually, you're, a few hundred miles north, and very sort of different style of diving. The south is all about the big animals, dolphins, sharks, that sort of thing. The north is much more about beautiful reefs. And the aim of this trip was about hitting those reefs in November, when the Red Sea's a long way north, and so as a result, the days get quite short, which is unusual in a coral sea. It's kind of very normal in temperate diving. And it means that you do typically 3 dives during the day and a night dive. At that time of year, there's really not time for much more. But the morning dive and the afternoon dive, the first dive and the third dive of the day, the sun is low in the sky, and you have beautiful light and very atmospheric diving conditions. And it's great for wide angle photography. So that's what this trip was all about. One of the things that you and I talked about at length after my previous Red Sea trip was the extensive coral bleaching that I'd seen in southern Egypt. And I'm really pleased to say that I'll put some video on this, but I was very pleased to see that up in the northern Egypt, there was some bleaching about, but very much a low level thing. The reef, you had to look for it. You didn't notice it. Few anemones, the odd coral species, some of the sheltered bays that are clearly got warmer had some bleaching, but
yeah.
the sort of spectacular reefs that we seek out in the Ras Mohammed National Park, in the Strait of Tiran, in Ras Mahmoud, those places the corals had showed very little signs of bleaching, and that was really heartening to see after sort of finding quite distressful things in the south. And then, yeah, photographically, we spent the week really making use of that low light. So doing a lot of wide angle photography in the morning and the afternoon. You get fantastically, moody atmospheric reef feeling, gives the pictures more contrast with that lower light. And then, you get the soft corals out much more. In the summer when it's in the middle of the day and it's bright and sunny, a lot of soft corals sort of, close up. It's not so photogenic. Whereas on a November trip, you have 2 of your 3-day dives with soft corals out. And that was really, really fun, really great to see them, to see all that color, all the amphias, all the action going on. We also did quite a lot of night diving, which I don't normally do when I run summer workshops there. Because in the summer, you have the opposite. You have particularly long days, because again, it's a long way north, so you get a kind of a long, extended summer day that you don't always get in most coral reef destinations. So in the summer, we can easily do 4 day dives and long day dives, in the day comfortably. And so we typically, do 4 long day dives and then don't dive at night in the summer. But I really enjoyed doing the night dives. Lots of Spanish dancers, lionfish. We had out hunting. We had there's something happens in the northern Red Sea in November, that there seems to be a migration of pelagic mackerel that you don't see on the dive sites, but at night they come into shore and sleep, it seems. So they come into sheltered bays. So one of the bays that we use as a mooring, we use it in the summer, and never ever see mackerel there at night. Whereas whenever I've been there in November, there's always mackerel at night under the boat. And so that's really cool fun to go in with a wide angle lens at night and shoot schooling fish, in the darkness under a boat, and you use really high ISO and get the lights from the liverboard coming in and everything. So that's kind of a lot of fun.
Were they being hunted by anything, or they're just hanging
No,
out there?
no, I think they come into shallow waters to avoid the pelagic hunters. And so they're just chilling out under the boat. So it's just a really unusual photo of everything. But yeah, it does, the last 2 times I've been there at that time of year, the mackerel are there, and all the times I've been there, not that time of year, they aren't there. So yeah, just a cool thing to see.
Yeah.
And another highlight is one of the night dives we did there is a massive dormitory for parrotfish. So it's like the most amazing place for doing all the macro scale patterns of parrotfish. I've always thought parrotfish are the most underrepresented in underwater photography of the coral reef fish. They're one of the first ones that everyone learns to identify, and then you hardly ever see photos of them. So I'm always on a mission to take as many parrotfish photos as I can to redress the balance.
So I'm going to regret this because now the song will be stuck in my head all day. But didn't you also see some sort of baby shark?
Yes. Yeah. So a highlight of the trip for the group was seeing a baby whale shark, probably only about 3 meters long at Shark Reef or Yolanda Reef, actually, at Ras Mohammed. Just right in a place you'd never expect to see one. And that was really cool to see. We saw dolphins from the boat, and just a really nice all-round workshop week. We also did, in the summer, I recce'd a site that's not dived very much, but it's kind of a rec site, and we did a nighttime off-camera strobe setup there, which I was really excited. The workshop guys were really excited about, because it was a place where I've never seen anyone I don't know anyone who's ever night dived it. So to go and do an off-camera strobe setup at night there was pretty cool for the guys on the trip. So yeah, I said to the guys I won't show any of my pictures from it until after the sort of contest season runs, just so that the pictures for them are fresh. So I won't say any more for now.
What strobes did you bring this time? Because I know last time you were shooting the hybrids and Marilux.
Yeah, so this time I took the hybrid flash, the backscatters, but I used for 80% of my dives my Retro Pros, Pro Maxes, because it was reef photography. That's what the Retros do, the quality of the light. And there was, a couple of times I switched to the backscatters and was I really, when you switch back and forwards, you notice the differences. And I was I want to get back on the retros. So I shot the retros most of the time. But there was one dive actually where I felt the retros were a bit underpowered for what I was doing. And so then I switched to the backscatters for a dive. I mean, the difference is relatively small, but I just kind of wanted that extra click of power for some of the big scenes that we were shooting.
When you were doing the off-camera stuff, what were you using for that? Or the off-camera light?
Particularly when you're working with a group, and I set the strobes up for the whole group to shoot. The lithium powered strobes are actually excellent for that, because you set them up, you put the video lights on the backscatters. They'll last all dive anyway, and then everyone can shoot them. I don't run them at their +2 power. I run them at full power, because I think they can overheat with a lot of shooting at the +2. So that's kind of only for extreme stuff. So, and at that full power, they're probably about the same power as the Mariluxes, but they've obviously got 2 clicks above that if you need it.
Yeah.
So they're good as off-camera strobes
Nice.
for that. Yeah. So yeah, and I really like using them as that. But actually, one of my flash triggers flooded. Someone donated one to me, and at the end of the summer workshop for me to use on future workshops. And this was its first dive, and it flooded. So I was a bit annoyed about that. So they were being all generous. So I was like, "Oh, you're so great! So thank you so much." And then I take it in for a dive, and it floods.
They set you up.
Yeah. I think that's probably a pretty good place for us to wrap up if you're happy with that.
I'm kind of out of questions for you on the Red Sea, but go ahead.
Yeah, no. Well, thanks everyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed hearing what we've been up to, and we'll be back again very soon with another episode.